go ahead and start the recording now, I think. And so this is 1 Million Cups for September 22nd in Richmond, Virginia. It's always good to start off by thanking our sponsors. So I represent an organization called Open Trellis. Laborum Edge also is a digital marketing agency. The Honor Loan Program, Dr. Michael Tyne is with us today from the Honor Loan Program, and VCU over the years, who have provided us a lot of workspace. And actually, as it turns out today, Sombo Chunda is a graduate of the Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs at VCU, and so she's here with us as well. And so welcome, Sombo, and really happy to hear what you're going to be sharing with us. Just as we get started here, I'll go through and just explain that 1 Million Cups, it's all about lowering the barriers to business ownership. So the topic today is particularly appropriate. And so we're always looking at ways to provide, whether it's education, other resources or connections, input and advice to entrepreneurs so that they can advance their business. So we've been doing this for over 6 years now here in Richmond, and nationally, 1 Million Cups is in about 150 communities. And really the secret sauce here is all about the culture. And it's really about building community, about presentations, people coming together to assist one another. So it's really not a pitch competition or where folks are kind of coming down hard on each other. It's really much more about being supportive, because we're all well aware that building a business is something that is pretty difficult to do. So now, I mean, some of the statistics are really great. 113,000 people nationally have attended 1 Million Cups events. So it's great over the years to have seen this grow. I think back in 2014, when we first got started in Richmond, there were about 20 or 30 communities around the country. And now you can just see the footprint here of what it looks like all around the Southeast region. So this is a little snapshot of our community organizers. I know that Ken Smither is with us today, myself, Ian Young. I think I saw Liz Romero dial in, and I know that John Brew joined us as well today, and Michael Time did as well. So if you happen to know anyone who's interested in presenting at 1 Million Cups, we'd love to hear from them. We've now just booked up through October, but we do have some openings for November. And if people are interested in presenting, it's a great way, number one, to promote what you're doing a little bit, but number two, to get some input, feedback, some questions, some pretty insightful questions about the business model from people who have been around the world of entrepreneurship for a while. So they're more than welcome to apply, and anyone who's interested can always contact me at any point. Also, plenty of ways to connect with us through social media. If you happen to have any kind of difficulty finding us on social media for any reason, feel free to get in touch with myself, or I know Ian's always interested in helping in that regard as well. I should mention that at the very end, we're going to leave about 5 minutes or so just to go through some of the startup community events that are happening around Richmond. We'd like to do that as a public service. So we'll do that at the very end, and all of that material Ian can circulate as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Dr. Sombo Chunda, we've known each other now for, it's been well over 2 years, if not 3 years. And it's always wonderful whenever we get to have conversations about topics that we both find incredibly interesting. And so we both have this real passion about business ownership as a way that's really helpful for people to establish a good livelihood for themselves and for their families, to advance economically. And we see that as this really powerful market-based economic lever that's helpful for people. And so I know Sombo has a heart for service, and so we just kind of resonate with each other on a lot of levels. She's also a very insightful academic. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Chunda. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dale. And I'm happy to be here, and welcome everyone. So I prepared very few slides because I want us to have a conversation, to have a conversation around the barriers that exist for entrepreneurship and, and also what we can do about that. How can we ensure that current programs and policies are responsive enough to ensure that people get the value that they need to get from these programs. So I prepared a few slides just to guide briefly with what the status is like. And I'm focusing on two things. The first thing is the barrier of access to capital. And then just to give an overview of how that looks like. And then I'm going to look at the barrier of access to knowledge, which is a very interesting one. Okay. Yeah, so like I said, I'm going to look at two barriers that I think are very important for us to consider. There's a whole long list of barriers to entrepreneurship that we can look at, and we would probably need a little bit more time. Dale, is my time 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Yeah, 10 to 15 should be good, and then we'll leave
Yes.
plenty of time for discussion.
Okay, I'm just trying to justify myself for not putting a very long list of barriers here. So these two are sort of universal barriers. Wherever you go in the world, you speak to a person who's starting out a small business, these are the things that they're going to tell you about. And most likely they won't talk to you about the lack of access, but to knowledge, they're going to talk to you about the first one, money, There's very little money, I don't have money, and this barrier comes up, all the time, all parts of the world. So what does that really look like? So the Kauffman Foundation research tells us that most people, the largest barrier that people face on entrepreneurship or access to entrepreneurship or owning a small business is limited access to capital. And about 83% of small business owners, don't have access to bank loans or venture capital when they're starting up their business. That's a very huge number of people. If we're talking about, if we keep talking about the fact that small businesses are the engine of the economy, So on one end, we're saying small businesses are the engine of the economy. On the other side, the reality is that people don't have access to funding for them to really be able to get into this space and run those small businesses. And then the research also shows that 65% rely on personal or family savings for them to start a small business. Now, how many people really have access to family savings for them to be able to start a business or use those resources to start a business? When we break that down, the picture gets a little bit more complicated, because when we talk about wealth, where people are coming from, it really complicates things, because not everyone has the ability or has access to some savings of sort, or friends that can give them money to start a business. So, and then 10% carry balances on their personal credit cards. I mean, if you're running a business, should you honestly finance it from your own pocket? It's hard to do that. I tried and my business failed. So, and it's just something that I wouldn't encourage or advise anybody to do. So the lack of access to capital is a very big problem. And now with the pandemic, we see that this can be broken down a little bit more. When we talk about lack of access to capital, what are we talking about? Who doesn't have this access that we would like to be there? So I have a quote here from Dr. Janice Underwood. I think she's the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the state of Virginia. And we had an interview with her. So I was part of a class offered by the Wilder School on the impact of COVID-19. And I did a study in that class focusing on how the pandemic impacted African-American small businesses. And in the conversation that we'd had with her, because we were asking, so there's PPP funds that have been released, what does that look like? And it's all access to capital. That's the reason why I brought it in. And her response was that, in the States, small businesses had been struggling. And that's because they were not, they did not have, a way with corporate lawyers and accountants to help them with processing the paperwork. And then going further, having conversations with some of the small business owners, just to try and understand how accessible the funding was for them during this time of the pandemic. Some small business owners say that, in some cases, they had to prove that they were American citizens, when in actual sense, they were American citizens. So you see all these different layers that have been put in place, such that even local people that are supposed to be accessing these funds are not accessing them. So it's a big problem. And I think we have to think about what kind of solutions can we come up with, how can we ensure that when we say that entrepreneurship is the engine for economic development and entrepreneurs employ the largest number of people, how can we ensure that those statements, when we say them, they are truthful to a larger extent? I'm not saying they're not truthful, they are truthful, but within the statements, there's a lot of things that we really need to break down to understand what is going on here. So I also wanted to talk briefly about just to unpack the barriers. When we talk about access to capital being a barrier for entrepreneurs, most of the times the language is a one size fits all kind of language, and we put everybody in the same pot, and or in the same basket. But it is important for us to think, what kind of entrepreneurs are we talking about? Is it those potential entrepreneurs who have, certain kind of barriers, and what are those specific barriers? How can we help them to overcome those barriers? Is it those that are intending to become entrepreneurs? They have an idea, maybe they've written down something, or they started the registration process, or is it actual entrepreneurs who are running their businesses, And the reason why it's important for us to understand barriers at these three different levels, it's because the solutions are different. We can't put the solution for a person who is just a potential entrepreneur, the solution to their barrier, to being the same solution to a barrier to a person who's an actual entrepreneur, because their needs are different. But it's really interesting to note that in entrepreneurship, that's the only space where, we get people, we want people to launch and start businesses without providing the right kind of support. And we're so convinced that they're going to succeed. Somehow we think that they're going to succeed, And I'll talk a little bit about this, because I've seen James is smiling, because you teach, financial literacy. So I'll talk a little bit about this thing of launching people and just getting them to go figure it out. But then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, when we think about barriers and unpacking that a little bit more, we need to think about the three different levels. At the micro level, we can look at individual factors. Are people well motivated, for them to take on, entrepreneurship? Do people have the right kind of knowledge for them to be able to succeed? And then we can look at institutional level factors, access to funding, capital, which we've already talked about. And we can also look at the big issues, what are the policies like, what is the infrastructure like to ensure that people can really succeed when they embark on this journey. And this is the one that I said I was going to, was kind of really interesting and exciting to me, because this is where my research lies on the impact of entrepreneurship training on developing entrepreneurial mindsets and economic well-being. So there is generally a limited access to knowledge. And when I say this statement about entrepreneurship, you're like, wait a minute, does she know what she's talking about? Didn't she see that there's lots of stuff on YouTube about entrepreneurship? Don't you see a lot of things in papers about entrepreneurs? There's a lot. There is a lot. And because everybody feels like they can just get into the space, do a short video, and then they plug you in for a little while and ping, you become an entrepreneur. Why do we operate like that? Why do we behave like that? When we want people to go to space, we make sure that, everything is set in the right way so that, the rocket doesn't fall down. But when we're getting people to start a business, we're comfortable with letting them view a YouTube video for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, and then we hope they're going to succeed. That's not right. It's not right. And then also we say that, you can go to business school and you're going to get the knowledge that you need. It will probably help you very much. And we've been saying for a long time that, incorporating entrepreneurship education through the K through 12 system. And we've also noticed that a number of institutions of higher education are providing a sort of entrepreneurship course for the students as they pass through the system. But the point still remains that there's this attitude of, instant knowledge, like instant noodles, you just do and, you're done and you can eat. So from the study that I have done and from the studies that I have reviewed, acquiring knowledge on entrepreneurship is not as simple as it's always, put out. Because knowledge acquisition is a very complex process. And most of the times we don't think about that when we're talking about entrepreneurship. Somehow we just think magically something is going to happen and people are going to take off and they're going to succeed. It's a number of things that need to be in place, that need to, interact and a number of different processes that need to be done right, to ensure that people at the end of the day can launch off properly. And like the rocket, when we're launching it up, we will have known and NASA will have been clear that, ABCD has been done. So if we adopt the kind of attitude that is there in other fields where you can't do certain things unless you get the right kind of knowledge, I think we would see a lot of small businesses succeeding. I haven't even put a slide here to talk about, the failure rate of small businesses. And the large, one of the main reasons why small businesses fail, it's because of knowledge. It's because of being illiterate financially. Financial illiteracy is a big problem. But then it's also just not being able to understand the things that a person is getting into. Anybody can have an idea. It's very exciting to have an idea. But if you have an idea, are you really willing to identify the opportunities that come with having that idea? Are you ready to take on risks, the specific risks that come up when you now start breaking down the idea? Are you willing and open to collaborate with others? Are you able to critically analyze, the market and, do all those important things that you need to do for you to know the point at which you need to, sell your service or product, for you to have a break even? All those are things that you can't get in a YouTube video for an hour. So then why do we always have this simple way and instant sort of gratification, kind of arrangement when we think about entrepreneurship training? And I have a problem with that. And I think that's the reason why I asked Dale if I could have this conversation with the people here, because I think it's problematic to think that way when we think about entrepreneurship. From the study that I have done, 4 things are very important when we talk about training in general. It's not just the knowledge dissemination part where, you watch a 1-hour, video, or you read an article about entrepreneurship, or you just sit in a class once or twice, or you go to the Small Business Development Center and get counseling services for 2 hours. It's more than that. And that, I think, is what we should be advocating for. How can we have programs that are very comprehensive and rigorous, and programs that really help at the end of the day to mold people into, entrepreneurs that are going to take on risks, to mold people into individuals that are going to run the businesses in the right way, succeed, expand, and not just operate for a few weeks, a few months, a year, and then close. So we need to think sustainability. How can we ensure that we build individuals that can operate businesses in a sustainable manner, and at the same time, themselves as individuals, of course, they're getting the economic benefit that they're supposed to get, but contributing to the economy as a whole. So from my study, 4 things are important, like I said earlier, and it's yes, having the knowledge. And when we talk about the knowledge, it's not just a piece of the knowledge. It's having detailed information, to help people to make the right kind of decisions, to help people to help individuals to run their businesses well. So I think earlier in this conversation, Dr. Michael and James were talking about how you have this collaboration running, and I was smiling because I was happy. I was happy because the Honor Loan program now is going to get this bit on, financial literacy, because that is important. When we teach entrepreneurship programs, we need to be able to, get people to think in a different way for a start, change their mindset. And that happens at so many different levels. It's very complex. It's not very simple, like sometimes we tend to think about it. So it's when we talk about knowledge dissemination, it's having a full package, can a person determine how much their service is going to cost? What really is going into that service? Or do they just dream up an amount and say, oh, I'll charge this amount? And then later on you realize, wait a minute, I can't even pay the rent. I'm closing this thing up. So the knowledge needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be knowledge on marketing. It needs to be knowledge on, accounting. It's not knowledge on, costing, sales, all these different pieces, legal compliance issues, HR, if you need to hire a person, how can you hire a person? Can you get a person to volunteer for you? It's having all these different pieces, thought through right at the start and throughout the entire process. So the knowledge dissemination piece is very important within entrepreneurship training. And there's the part for actual practice, and when people are given an opportunity to even just practice a little aspect of what they're going to encounter in the real world, an experiential learning kind of arrangement, it makes them to see things differently. And those interactions that they have with others through the practice also enable them to discover new knowledge. And if there's something that they hadn't thought about, by just going through this practice, it makes them to become aware to, things that they'd never thought about. So, but you can't have an opportunity to practice when you're watching a video for an hour, or when you're just visiting an office for 2 hours to get counseling. You can't, So practice helps with grounding people in the knowledge, but then also it helps with making them to think differently and to confront, things that are unclear. And then there's also the part of examples. Examples are very important when we talk about entrepreneurship training. So who are the examples? Who gives examples? I've had conversations with a good colleague. Joanna is a part of RVA Works. And so a little earlier when we would have conversations, we talk about, we have a situation where people that have not even run a business before are providing advice on how to run a business. And my point here is to talk about examples. I know anybody can give advice, but if we're talking about examples and we're talking about ensuring that people succeed at the end of the day, I would rather listen to a person who started a business and failed, so I learn what they learned, than have a conversation with a person who is giving me knowledge from a book. Knowledge from a book is excellent, but we're talking about knowledge from a book and adding that up with actual examples. So we have knowledge, we have practice, where people are given opportunities to, implement an aspect of their idea within a program. But then we're also talking about examples. What kind of examples are out there? What did you do that worked well? What did not work well? And then it's having a network. I think it's very important to have a network of individuals that think in a similar manner as you do, individuals that you can call upon at any time. If you can't call upon them anytime, at least once a month or once a week, you can meet with them, you can interact with them, and you can get inspired, you can get motivated, because we know that the entrepreneurial journey is a very lonely one. It's one where you can easily give up if you're not strong. So those four things are very important from my study, and also I've seen from other studies that I reviewed. So it's experiential learning, practice, examples in form of actual entrepreneurs that have succeeded or have failed, and it's having a network. And of course, the knowledge is so important, and knowledge, not just a small little component, but in-depth knowledge. And when we talk about knowledge, we're talking about, democratizing knowledge. Like, we want to democratize business ownership. So for us to be able to do that successfully, we need to have these different ingredients in place and make sure that everything works out well. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I think I'll end here, and then we can have some questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Sombo. You covered a lot of ground there. And I have a lot of notes. I'm going to start off with the first question, and then I want to make sure people feel comfortable to use the raise hand icon, or actually just physically raise their hand. So as you think about the different barriers, and and specifically, you had mentioned micro, meso, and macro. Can you just give us a little bit of a flavor of what specifically you mean by those terms, and how you think about barriers at those different levels?
Yeah, so at the micro level, I talked about, it's the knowledge bit, and then it's also the motivation bit. Those are all individual level factors, and it could also be social cultural factors, what kind of, issues exist, roles in a home, all those are micro level barriers. And then the meso level barriers, I talked about institutional arrangements, could be access to funding, it could be, the culture in the particular community. Are people stereotyped? And how do people feel in those spaces? Are there networks that people can be part of as, the infrastructure for entrepreneurship? And then the macro level barriers, it's the policies that are being adopted, around entrepreneurship. I didn't want to talk more about policies, because I know that some studies that have been done have shown that there's a lot of colorblind policies, So when you have colorblind policies, you get to have problems, because there are lots of structural issues, that feed into the present. And these are things that have happened in the past, but they continue going on. So adopting colorblind policies at the macro level, in the end, does not really help certain groups of people. And that presents a huge barrier.
Okay, I think we're ready. Thank you. So I think we're ready for the next question. Okay, Eudora, you're up.
Okay, my question, I've been looking at some things regarding impact investing, and where would you even go to find impact investors, or where would you find someone to guide you through the process, even acquiring or connecting with an impact investor? And as a side note, I feel like you hit the point. You really hit a nail with me as far as getting detailed information and the whole bit about knowledge, because my problem with my business that I kind of fell off on in 2019 was with my mobile detailing business, where I signed up with Eva and I saw the potential for it, but there was nobody to show me how to write an effective bid. And I got with SBSD and I went to a couple other people, but it was a very limited number of like business owners who are willing to teach me how do you write a bid that's effective. So I had to resort to like just looking at other people's old bids, because public information on the Eva website, to look at the bids that have won in the past to see where they were at, and trying to acquire a contract with the state to do work with them. The money was there, the opportunity was there, but I couldn't access because I have some things I just didn't know. Some of the detailed info about like licensing and that sort of thing, and also writing a bid. Even though I had the equipment and I had the business, I had the stuff to do the job, I just couldn't get those contracts. I just didn't had lack of knowledge.
Yeah. So your question is very packed, Eudora. Yeah. So I think the first part you talked about, where do you get connected to impact investors, right?
Yes.
Yes. So one of the barriers that I didn't include on the list is, access to networks. And I talked about that being a very important piece when I say the 4 important things that we need to have when we're talking about developing entrepreneurs. So access to networks has been found to be a very huge barrier, especially in minority communities, Black and African American, and then also in other ethnic groups. Access to networks is a challenge. So, but there are, groups, impact investors groups that you can be a part of. And the thing still is, if you're not found in certain spaces, you're not going to know about these things. And I think for me, that's where the big problem is. How can we ensure that we have more people having access to some of these spaces? Because if you don't have access to that space, then you won't be part of the network, then you won't know what is going on. So in part, I can say, the RVA Works Alumni Network is a good starting point. And maybe I think, Dale, for you to pick this up, I know that you've been providing a lot of information around a lot of things that are happening around, but maybe just to think about, who's working and who's doing that, what in the impact investing space. I know we have the VIIF, Virginia Impact Investing Forum. They're now acquired by the Social Entrepreneurship group over at the University of Virginia. Yeah, I just learned about that. Yeah, very recently, that they were acquired by the University of Virginia. But the Virginia Impact Investing Forum was a good space. I honestly don't know what is going on with them now, what is happening. But I know that the time that I came, so when I came here in 2016, my first thing to do was to find who are the people within the impact investing space. So I started hunting and I started looking around, and I was able to locate the people. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, Tanya is alumna of the, yeah, that's great. Yeah, so there's a social entrepreneurship, within the Barton School of Leadership, I think, and they're the ones that acquired the Virginia Impact Investing Forum. I can connect you, Eudora, and just maybe find out some information about what is going on there, because Dale and my colleague Bala works in that office, so he could be helpful with helping to make that connection. So there are a number of impact investors and a number of impact investing groups that you can be a part of as a starting point. I think the other part of your question is very specific, on knowledge. Just how can you, have access to people that can help you, to put in a bid correctly. And that reminds me of, this slide that I had shared on what Janice Underwood was saying in terms of the problem that they saw here in Virginia with small business owners struggling to have access to corporate lawyers and accountants. And in your case, Eudora, it's just having access to somebody that could walk with you. You can have a template that has been prepared before, but you need to have somebody to look through the template with you. Once you do your initial draft, is there somebody else who's going to read it and say, we can change this way, we can frame this in this manner. If we word it this way, then the chances of us getting this bid are very high. So, but so that now connects to having a network. If you're part of a network and the network is large enough, and the individuals within that network that have that kind of expertise, then it works well. If you have mentors within the network that can provide that kind of service, then it really gets, it really becomes helpful to you as a person with an idea, as a small business owner. So maybe I shouldn't say this. Yeah, I wanted to say a little bit more about another business or a number of business ideas that haven't taken off because individuals have these brilliant ideas and because they don't have people that they can work with, in the initial phase of their startup, and they end up giving up on the ideas. And then a little later on, you see somebody else implements the idea because they had the resources, they had individuals, and they had people that were knowledgeable to help them. That really hurts a lot. So I will stop here.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sombo. I know there's a few resources. I just put some links in there, Eudora, for you. Just I think the Virginia Impact Investing Forum is a great starting point. There's a lot in there about understanding what type of capital is needed and then connecting with the people who are providing that specific type of capital. So it's really important to clarify that because there's a range of different types of impact investments and based on asset classes. And so I think that's really important, that if you hear no from one impact investor, it doesn't mean no. It just means that person, it's not relevant for them. And there's a lot in there to make sure that as we're thinking about the business model, we have the right asset class in mind that's relevant for the growth of the business that we're intending. And then we can start thinking about which sort of sources of impact investment would be helpful. Also, I put up a couple of resources there. I saw that Dan Light also mentioned SCORE, which is great. Not certainly, I don't think anyone's ignoring SCORE. I know John Brew is here with SCORE. So we're always happy to talk about the services that they provide and to promote them as part of the Richmond ecosystem. And so Dan, thanks for bringing that up. There's a pretty extensive mentor network with Richmond SCORE, as well as different workshops that cover particular topics. So happy to talk about that as well. Maybe the next question for Sombo.
I have a question for Sombo. I don't know how to raise my hand now. I'll raise it. Sombo, if you could speak for a second on the arrogance of a new business owner, because we, in my, how to put it, connection with new business owners, a lot of them come in thinking that they know everything and you can't tell them anything. And I compare it to Tom Brady versus another athlete. Tom Brady I think most would agree, even though I'm not a Brady fan, is the #1 quarterback in the NFL. Yet, Tom Brady comes to work every day trying to get better.
Mhm.
And then you have other athletes who just think they're good. But I got to give him credit. Every off season, he's trying to get better. So I speak to the arrogance of the small business owners who don't really have the things that you just spoke about, but at the same time, they're so arrogant. It's as if they know everything, but they have got to maintain arrogance, I think, to be a good anything. You have to be arrogant, but you have to know how to, tame it a little bit and get better every day, like Tom Brady. So if you can speak for a second, I'm not sure if you found that or not.
Yeah. I think I said a little bit about ideas. I said anyone can have an idea.
Mhm.
And, anyone can have an idea, and we can love our ideas so much. Our ideas become like our children. They become our identity. And if anybody comes in and is trying to tell us or give us advice, and that, you can do this differently, or even we won't even see it within ourselves to say, you know what, I'm lacking in this area, let me go and ask. Because we become one with our ideas, and we think that we know it all. We think that, this is going to work out. I've been in that space. I ran one small business that didn't work out. It was very heartbreaking. And I don't know if there was an aspect of arrogance in there, but maybe there was. I should have gathered a lot more information. I should have been more knowledgeable before getting into that space, and losing a lot of money at the end of the day. It doesn't need to get to the point where people lose money because they're not knowledgeable. I think we can make, when we have conversations like this, when we have people being able to see examples of people that have, succeeded and failed, and maybe we need more stories of failure to help tame the arrogance. Because if one continues on the path of arrogance, the guaranteed end most of the time is failing. So yeah, I've seen Dan has written there's value in failure. Yes, there's lots of value in failure, but if we can work with individuals that have already gone through that path, and they can help us to see things differently and to learn, then we would avoid acquiring that value. I mean, the fact that everybody needs to fail at some point. I believe in failing. I have failed several times. I've failed several times. And sometimes when people look at you, they think that you're a success, but deep inside the things that you have gone through. So I laugh most of the times. I'm like, so you fail and you learn. But if you can be in a position where you reduce the number of failures, maybe it's good for your heart. Maybe it's good for your brain. I don't know, but the fact is that, small business owners most of the times get to be arrogant. I've run small businesses before. I've been arrogant, and just being able to learn, I think, adds more value. Being willing to, acquire new knowledge on different things, not only on running a business, but then also just how things work around in the economy, how to interact with individuals. All those are very important things, getting to learn and have wisdom, getting to get wisdom from people that have been through the path before, really, really helps a lot. I don't know if I've answered your question correctly.
I'm not sure if there was one answer, but you definitely really covered the topic of arrogance, and and for more people, I'm able to discuss it with more people, getting different people's opinion. Does anybody else?
Thank you for that. Yeah, McKinley, thank you for that question. And I would also echo the sentiment that's been shared as well on the chat, that there's a difference there between confidence and arrogance. And I think being confident in terms of what one knows and what one's able to deliver is incredibly important and powerful. And it's important to convey that. At the same time, I think that can go too far when we start assuming that we know everything and are not open to new ideas, right? So we don't want it. We don't want the confidence to turn into closed-mindedness. Also, I just wanted to echo, Dan Light had made a great point in the chat about failing fast and failing forward, learning and moving ahead, kind of taking all that insight. So thank you for that, Dan. Great point. And Sid, I think you're up next. And then I see we're going to get to Dr. Michael Time. Go ahead, Sid.
Hi, Sombo.
Hi, Sid. How are you?
Good, good. My question is, what do you think is the root cause of the lack of access capital for women entrepreneur and Black minority entrepreneur, and what will it take to solve this issue? I mean, I've heard this for the past few years, but I don't think the needle has been moved. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question. I think some of the research points to the fact that people haven't built up, a good credit history. So they can't access funding because of that. And so when we talk about knowledge, the detailed knowledge, instead of just, I'm sorry if I keep referring to the 1 hour YouTube video, it's being able to, get people to know that for them to be able to access capital, for example, they need to have the following things in place, because if they don't have those things in place, then it's not going to work out. So that's one thing on one end. But then on the other end, we also have a market, an economic system that probably doesn't give equal opportunities. And even if people are knowledgeable and they have put certain things in place, still when they get to that space where they have to meet a banker and they have to, pitch their idea and say, look, I'm looking for capital for this, they may not be able to get it because the system, is not giving equal opportunities, or is not open enough to be able to take in certain groups of people because of a perceived risk that certain groups of individuals have. And Sid, Dale, and Dr. the lady in the UK, you've been working around, how to make the process of capital access seamless for individuals, and working on, software applications to be able to do the screening process and everything. So now the conversation becomes even more complex. The needle hasn't been moved. What is stopping people from having access now? It's AI. Data is fed into a system and the system rejects you. So it's you could think that the needle is being moved, but things are getting a little bit more complex. So how can we untangle this complexity? But I am very hopeful that with a lot of initiatives like, what you're trying to do with the capital, with the funding, those are things that really make a difference at the end of the day. Because if a person goes to a bank and they can't access the funding, they need to have other options, and those other options need not to present the same face that the bank presents to them. I'm not saying giving free money, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thanks so much for that, Sambo. Yeah, and the professor you were referencing is Dr. Swati Sahan, who's based in, she moved recently. She's at the University of Leeds now. So so, okay, I think, Michael, you're up next.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was just going to add a comment. I think briefly going back to the arrogance comment, sometimes it may look like arrogance, sometimes it may be confidence, but sometimes it could just be the entrepreneur's overwhelmed. There's too much going on, it's too overwhelming, it's too stressful, so they just shut down. They're like, I can't tend to these 15 fires. And so them being dismissive of something may just be their way of saying, if I acknowledge or take on that extra thing, I'm going to have a breakdown. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah. So I mean, burnout is a serious thing around the entrepreneurial community, and most of the times there aren't any programs that sort of really take care of that. Even just thinking about that, you know, it's when you're getting into this space, you need to be ready to meet certain kind of challenges. But if you haven't had an opportunity to speak through those kind of challenges, you probably won't even think through them, and you won't even come up with little plans to handle them. So I believe in making small little plans, you know. So I think big, but then I act very small, you know. So make little plans and think very big, and those small little plans all need to add up to that big thing that you're trying to achieve. So when you get into this space, you expect to burn out, you know, because at some point you may need to work a lot. You may need to be the person who's doing the accounting for yourself. You're the person who's doing the marketing. You're the person who's doing the social media. You're the person who's selling. You're doing all these things and you get tired, you know. So, and sometimes that may present itself when you're called upon to do other things like, oh, that person is arrogant. So that's why knowledge is very important, because when you have knowledge, you become confident, you know. You become confident at many different levels, and you even have the ability to say no and avoid getting burnt out in the process. So yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Michael, for that. It's important to think about that in the conversation.
For sure. McKinley.
I'll try to be quicker. Gosh, my thought, old age, don't get old. Idea went right through my head. Would it be a good idea? I help small business owners. Mm-hmm. Sometimes success, sometimes not success, but we're stable and we've been doing it for 49 years. So, you know, we have more wins than we do losses, a whole lot more, because a lot of magazines are writing about what we do. But from a personal point of view, would it be important to ask a question? Where do you want your business to go? Mm-hmm. Do you want your business to be a multi-million-dollar business? Do you want it to be a $500,000 business? Are you looking to just sustain your family? And I'm not sure that business owners even think of that. So if you know where you want to go, then talk to the people who have done a multi-million-dollar business. Don't talk to a family someone that wants to improve their family zip code per se, or improve their family. And if you really want to be a multi-million-dollar company, you need to get around and get information from those people. And I think that will kind of help a lot to define where you're going to go. And the other thing was, well, let me just stop at that. I'll raise my hand, let somebody else speak. There was another idea. Oh, I'm sorry. Polly White, and what's her husband's name? Doug and Polly White wrote a book called Let Go to Grow. Mm-hmm. I don't think young business owners want to let go because it's their baby. Mm-hmm. But if they're going to grow, their book, they point out, you need to let it go and have advisory boards that are going to help you and bring in other people. And I'm not sure when someone starts a business, they even know who they can go to for this high level help that they trust, because trust is a key issue. So, you know, it's just figure out where they want to go, talk to those people and let it go to grow, or be happy where you are, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's very important. And I think when we talked about knowledge and lack of access to knowledge, and just that conversation there, you know, when you learn about running a business, you're supposed to learn about strategic planning, you know, and you're supposed to learn about governance, you know, of the business. You know, at what point do you bring in advisors? You know, what role do the advisors play? The advisors that you're bringing on board, are they knowledgeable enough, or it's just your buddies that you're bringing? If it's just your friends that you're bringing, you'll probably be at the same level, because they're not going to challenge you to think differently. They're not going to make you to want to go to the next level. So if they're content with the level that they're at, you're all going to stay at the same level. So it becomes very, very important to think about getting an advisory board in place, getting to speak to people that have, attained the next level that you want to go to, because that is important. If the goal is to just, stay in the same neighborhood and do the same things over and over again, which is great, there's nothing wrong with that, then that can be pursued. But if the goal, I see lots of businesses here and I'm like, this business has lots of potential. And I keep thinking to myself, the potential for this business is beyond this zip code. It's beyond the state. It's beyond the US. This is supposed to be a global business. So why is it restricted to just this place? And I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why things are like that. And sometimes I really don't get to understand. But the thing is that asking those questions, Mr. Tucker, and thinking about them deliberately and coming up with a bigger plan. If I want to make this business national, what do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? What kind of things do I need to put in place for the next 5 years? Thinking long term in this whole conversation is also very important, because I think sometimes businesses don't grow big because they don't think beyond 5 years. They just think, are we able to get through the month? Are we able to get through 1 year? So it's having plans that you can implement now, short-term plans and long-term plans, like, thinking fast and slow, that kind of thinking, that needs to be put in place, and that kind of planning that needs to be implemented. So the short-term plans and the long-term plans, that's very, very important.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Sombo. And McKinley, thanks so much for the questions and comments. Really helpful and appropriate, particularly when we think about mindset. And I know Sombo has been looking a lot at what it means to think like an entrepreneur. Could you just touch on that a little bit, Sombo, how people's mindset kind of changes as they begin to think more entrepreneurially?
Yeah. So it's 10. I want to run away.
2 minutes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So when people start thinking in an entrepreneurial, they take on risks. Taking risks becomes very easy. Calculated risks, think through properly and, have all these different, things under consideration. So risk taking is one of the things that happens, willingness to take risks rather. And then they also get an ability to solve problems. So entrepreneurship is basically problem solving. If a person is an entrepreneur or want to become an entrepreneur and they don't have a problem they're solving, they have to try something else. So entrepreneurship is about solving problems. So the moment that people start thinking that way, they are able to identify problems and they are able to get on the ability to solve problems. But then also, they have an eye to identify opportunities. And I guess some people see problems and some people see opportunities. So problems are opportunities to be able to act and do things differently. But then also, beyond risk, beyond solving problems, and it's being motivated. Having the intrinsic motivation for you to be able to act. Those are some of the important things. But then also just confidence. When people become entrepreneurs, somebody said there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Confidence comes with knowledge, and sometimes arrogance comes with ignorance. So it's very, very important to be able to differentiate that, but the confidence really goes up. And personally, I think that each one of us is born an entrepreneur. And as we go through life beats each one differently. And some, it really beats all the entrepreneurship out of them. And then for others, they somehow find their way back and say, wait a minute, and then they go on that path. So yeah, it's a whole lot of things. It's ability to solve problems, ability to collaborate with others and having a positive mindset, and being able to identify opportunities and being willing to take risks. If you can't do those, are really just like the basics. If you can't do those, then the journey becomes very difficult to take.
Well, thank you so much,
Can we go-
Sombo.
can we
This
go
is really, really
second
good
floor?
information.